that leader example that I gave you, she came to me and said, how can I be more influential and persuasive to the people that I need to convince that I need to be part of these meetings? Like, if only they would change, right? And I get that. That's where we go first, right? We want to control our external environment, but I promise you that you must deal with your internal environment first, because that is driving everything that you pay attention to versus not pay attention to. And the reality is, as human beings, we do not pay attention to 100% of the data that's presented to us. We selectively choose what to pay attention to.
Welcome to a new episode of the Hero of the Hour podcast. In today's episode, our host Mark Murphy engages in a profound conversation with Susan Drumm. Susan isn't your everyday CEO. She's a leadership coach, best-selling author, and a beacon of enlightenment leadership, a unique philosophy that's redefining the paradigm of leadership for a more humanistic future. You see, Susan's own journey to becoming this transformational figure was marked by a bold step away from her corporate career to pursue a master's degree in acting at age 30. These experiences not only shaped her unique approach to leadership, but also prepared her to effectively coach a diverse array of influential figures, from billionaire CEOs and high-profile Fortune 50 executive teams to game-changing entrepreneurs shaking up their respective industries. In this episode, we're going to unpack Susan's concept of heroism. She'll share her personal definition of a hero and reveal who in her life embodies this title. Alongside, Susan will offer a peek into her journey, her evolution into a leadership coach, and her vision for the future. We're also delving deep into how our past experiences, particularly our childhood wounds, mold our present leadership styles. Susan will enlighten us on ways to recognize these wounds, heal them, and consequently transform our leadership and personal lives. She'll draw from the realms of music and neuroscience to share transformative strategies and tips with us. For those of you striving to build and sustain high-performing teams, you're in for a treat. Susan will let us in on her insights into understanding core motivators and reveal her secret sauce for catalyzing exponential growth. Let's dive in.
Today, I've got a very, very special guest. In fact, I even want to put my glasses on for this because I don't want to miss anything about it, but I have Susan Drumm with us. And I just want to tell you a little bit about Susan. She has personally coached billionaire CEOs, high-profile political figures, prominent Fortune 100 executive teams, and incredible entrepreneurs that set out to disrupt the marketplace. She's a CEO advisor, a leadership coach, focused on helping leaders and their teams to develop the capacity and mindsets to lead in today's disruptive environment. I think we're going to get into all the details. I know she's got her own podcast, so I'm so fortunate to have her on this podcast, but it's ranked in the top 2% of downloads globally. And she is also the author of this fabulous book that I've gotten a chance to read. And I think that anybody who picks up this book will be wiser from reading it. But it's called The Leader's Playlist. And so having said that, Susan Drumm, thank you for taking time out of your very, very busy day to join us today.
Oh, thank you. It's my pleasure to be here with you.
I'd love to, I call this podcast the Hero of the Hour. And I've generally just had people there that are either heroes to me or heroes to other folks, personal heroes. And so I just love to always kind of ask people, how do you define a hero and who are some of your heroes?
Yes, it's such a great question. I really find heroism in the ability to speak the truth authentically and vulnerably, and also to take courageous action. But I feel like there's so much puffery in the world about presenting ourselves in a certain way. You look at social media and we're all trying to, you rarely hear about the struggles people are facing. It's more about like, I'm on vacation here and there, which is fine. And we know what it is. But I would say in general, in interactions, the people that are heroes to me can speak the truth courageously. First of all, they have a different look at the truth. And an example would that a more famous example, then I'll tell you a personal example. A famous example would be Trevor Noah. I think he speaks the truth courageously, and not everybody loves him for it. But that's not his goal. He's being authentic to who he is. And I think that attracts a different set of people to him as a result. So there's that one piece that's like, and then I say, take courageous action. And what I mean by that is heroes to me are connected to a meaningful mission outside themselves, meaning as opposed to filling their own egoic needs of being right, being in control, looking good, being included. They've done some work to heal that. And what they're committed to is serving in some way, committed to some meaningful mission outside dealing with those. And people that do that, and my personal hero is my brother. My brother took in my parents and cared for my dad in the later stages of his life, still caring for my mom in the house, he and his wife. And, the amount of service that my brother did to care for my dad at the last stages of life when he was bedridden probably should have been in a home, but refused. The selfless giving there was extraordinary. And so I find that incredibly courageous, right? And also this ability to, again, commit to a mission outside his own wants and needs, because a lot of that got subjugated.
That having gone through that recently, last couple of years with my parents, that's not a fun process. And he put his life on hold for them, and that's a great brother and a great son. So
and sister-in-law who's part of that mix as well. So both of them together, they really have stepped up, as well as I could say my sister too, and all these pieces were all supporting our family. But I know caring for my dad was particularly hard when you've got a large man who's bedridden and you have to care for him.
I think people would love to hear. I did a live stream earlier, and what I felt so wonderful about was there were some very, very successful people on our live stream. People been friends we worked with a long time. But what I loved about them, we were talking just before we went on air. We were talking about vulnerability a little bit, and I'd love to see that that all those people, they didn't have any failures. They had success and they had learning, and they were very vulnerable about getting knocked down and getting back up again, and getting knocked down again and getting back up until they had this wonderful success. Because I think so many people just think, you show up and you're at the top of the world day one.
Lucky.
Yeah. You're just lucky, or they're there, and I don't think people see what's there. So I know a little bit about your history, but I think people would love to know, kind of where you started and where you are right now, and where you're going.
Yes. Well, took me a while to find my way, but since I've been doing this work in leadership development for 20 years. But prior to that, I went to law school at Harvard and did not end up practicing law, much to the chagrin of my parents, right? How could you do that? But I knew it wasn't the right profession for me, but I didn't know what I was going to do because I had a lot of loan debt. I had loan debt from undergrad and grad school. And so from there, but the thing is that each one of these steps, what I've learned after the fact, at the time, it was very disheartening. It was depressing for me. But now as I look back, each one of the steps in the twists and turns that got me to where I am actually feeds what I do today. And I probably couldn't do what I do today. It wasn't for that. So what law taught me was this ability to hone the skill of making distinctions. And as opposed to using it for case law, I use that same skill for mindset and making distinctions in mindset and helping people make distinctions. So it was actually a blessing, as was some of other. So I went into consulting, doing at BCG, Boston Consulting Group. I went to NBC television in marketing and business development. And they both had times where it's like I wasn't liking any of it. Like I just felt lost. And here I am, bright, eager. And I felt like the managers I worked with were not very inspiring. I didn't want to do this work. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I felt really lost. And so at age 30, I took a break. And I was fortunate to be able to do that. I had just gotten married, moved to London, and I decided to pursue something at least I felt some passion or connection to, which was acting. And I got a master's from the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Arts.
Wow.
And it was through doing that that I thought, wow, I'm learning so much that I think business leaders could use around this ability to connect authentically, to deal with the inner critic, that voice inside your head, because as an actor, if you don't get a handle on that, you're going to be worried about what the person in the front row is doing with their cell phone, right? And that ability to be present, focused, to develop empathy for whatever character you're playing, or understanding their perspective or taking their perspective for a moment. And all of those skills, I thought there's got to be a way I could bring this back to business. And that's really how I got involved in leadership development over 20 years ago. And have stuck with that. So I finally found my calling and have been sticking with it ever since.
One of the reasons I was very excited to get to develop a relationship with you and get to know you is that I decided about 35 years ago that I wanted to be a hero to entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial thinking people. And when I read your book, it was so clear to me that you had unlocked some of the keys to helping those people create bigger, better futures. And, I mean, even things that, that if I didn't read the book, I would sort of like, but then when I read it, it made like a lot of sense. Like, like one of the concepts you have about feeling your way to becoming a better leader, or, or people say, about unleashing the power of music. I mean, I think these are concepts. There's a lot of leadership books out there. There's a lot of leadership strategies, but I think you clearly have not only a unique spin, but an incredibly effective spin on it. I'd love you to share some of how you developed that and some of that for
yes.
folks on the podcast.
Well, to give an overview, the subtitle of the book, The Leader's Playlist, is How to Unleash the Power of Music and Neuroscience to Transform Your Leadership and Your Life. And I mean it. And a lot of times people are like, music and neuroscience, that's crazy. Well, if you look at my background, you understand how I brought that in. But I offer two bodies of research that I think are really important. The first is looking at how our childhood wounds affect our leadership today. Because if anything I could tell you over 20 years and coaching all these leaders, how they're reacting in the moment has everything to do with the filter that got instituted back when they were children and whatever occurred in their life. And we don't get through childhood without some type of wound. Some have had more trauma. So I talk about a lot of research about how childhood trauma and childhood wounds affects our health, our state of being, our mind, but also our perspective very deeply. And in some ways that can become that does become a superpower of yours. It's what makes you successful or who you are today. But it also comes with it a liability. And unless you turn and take a look at the liability, which is, I describe in the book, the monster you're actually running from, then it's going to color the results or limit or cap, put a ceiling on the results that you can produce over time. And as your business gets more complex, as we're facing more disruption, you come head to head with that thing that you're running from. And what I wanted to provide was a unique way to become aware of that and heal it. And that's where I brought in the power of music. So music, the other second piece of body of research, is about how music impacts the brain. Music lights up all regions of the brain, and it is so powerful to be able to help you see and create new neural pathways. It's almost like a fertilizer. And so with that, the being able to use music in that capacity can both use it to identify the old neural pathway that is what I call your 8-lane highway to hell, that has you right? The thing that triggers you or gets under your skin that continually shows up in your life, the pattern. Use music to both identify and then use and build a playlist to create a new neural pathway, that fertilizer to be the type of leader that you actually know you need to be and want to be.
That is, I think that makes perfect sense. As somebody who, I mean, when you deal with people's money, money is never math; it's always psychological.
Yes.
And you're dealing with people's experiences, and most of the time that come from childhood that affect them. And you can, it's hard to be a prophet in your own land, but when you have done it as long as we have, you could step back and you see that so clearly. And oftentimes they're totally unaware of that as well. There's absolutely no awareness
Yes.
of who they are.
Or what's
The
really driving them, right? They think, oh, if I get this, right? That's the syndrome of if I get the car, if I get this, or if only I had that. But working with billionaires, I've certainly seen there's still a healing that needs to happen that's truly about you loving yourself and feeling fulfilled so that you can commit yourself to a meaningful mission.
It's clear to me why music. I think you explained that, but just keep elaborating on why this is
Yeah.
different than I think part of it, like there's probably a lot of people watching this podcast who are running companies or running family offices or running groups of teams, and they're saying we need in 2023 to find somebody or something to give a jump to our organization. We want to invest in somebody that's going to help our company expand. Give them an idea of other differentiating factors. I don't believe in competition. I believe in differentiation. And I think your book is a clear differentiator from other leadership books. Tell us more about how you think about that. Tell me a little more about that.
Well, sure. Just in terms of the types of tools that we bring to bear, besides using music, outside of that, or do you want me to go into more depth about the impact that using music could have on leadership?
I think either. I think somebody, because people are watching this, they're going to say this is something like, I don't think there's going to be very few people who go, I thought that the key to us getting to the next level of success is going to be music. They turn on this and they're not going to go, oh, we've been looking for somebody to help us with music. We're creating a playlist.
Yeah.
And I think that, so just, it doesn't,
Yes.
I think give the 6th grade version or the 8th grade version, but something where people go, hey, I'd like to know more about this, because I think it's downright fascinating.
I think it's best for me to describe it in terms of a story of a leader that I've worked with. And in the book, by the way, I go through 9 of the most common old playlists. And I use the term playlist both figuratively and literally. And so the figuratively is like, what's that old wound that's been getting in your way, that's putting the ceiling on your leadership effectiveness? So I give these 9 little vignettes because they're the most common ones that I've seen. But I'm going to tell a story about one of them that is a great example. So Deborah was a chief marketing officer at a tech company in the Bay Area, and she got some 360 feedback that the way she was engaging with her colleagues was not productive and actually creating more strife within the company. They felt like she needed to be included in everything and would get upset when she wasn't CC'd on a certain email or wasn't included in a meeting. And from her perspective, it was like, look, I'm the marketing officer. I need to be aware of these things so I can best support and fulfill my duties. Sounds reasonable, and I can see her point. On the other hand, what I'm always curious about is what's going on underneath that's actually causing this to show up in her life. Why is this happening? So we take a very different angle. Why are you experiencing this type of feedback? And why is your experience that you are left out of key meetings? So what I ask her to say is, what emotions come up for you when you get the email you find out about the CC email, or when you find out about those other meetings that you weren't attended to? And she says, I feel frustrated. I feel, angry, and I feel like I'm left out. Like I'm not welcomed, essentially. And I said, that's interesting. So where else in your life have you felt that more in recent times? And she thought about it and she said, well, I feel that when I'm divorced, and my adult children go to my ex-husband's lake house that I used to be part of, right? And I used to go there, and they share photos and everything. I feel those same emotions come up. Okay, where else in your life? And we go back and we start to see actually a pattern that she'd never noticed before. She felt the same when she was going in through sorority rush, and she didn't
Right.
get into her top 3 choices, right? It goes all the way back to childhood, where her sister was sort of the vivacious, pretty blonde, and she felt like she was the mousy, nondescript hair color, shy one that no one would pay attention to. So when neighbors came over, they would all fawn over the older sister and leave her. So she adopted, unbewittingly to herself, this sort of belief that she's not welcome. And because she holds that belief, she's literally projecting out a vibration, a frequency, an energy that is going to show up in her life. And there's a whole series of pieces where that happens. So how do we use music to deal with that? Well, we use music to first have her catch herself on that pattern, to notice how insidious it actually is. She wasn't as aware of it as before. And we used a particular anchor song called was Adele's Hello.
Okay.
And so if you know, it's like, hello, can you hear me? She's like begging for, and with that, when she would get the email or, be in the moment, it was a trigger interrupter that she was like, oh, there's Adela again. Okay. I'm just experiencing that same pattern of emotions where I feel left out. So part of that was the interrupter, but then we needed to create a new playlist that's equally, we build up over time, and we build it faster and more efficiently using music, to identify a new playlist that she titled I Bring Peace and Appreciation. That was the title of the playlist. And there was all sorts of songs in there that had her feel the emotional state that she wanted to be in. She says, I want to feel gratitude. I want to feel peace. I want to feel like I am welcomed. So the music actually gets her into that emotional state. And her job, when we built a plan, was to use that music when she's triggered, use that music when she starts her day, and also start to pay attention to places where she was invited. And so examples, she was invited by the neighbor for a glass of wine. She was invited by her kid to the baseball game. And the more she did it, the more she could get herself and widen the aperture of her experience of life to all the ways in which she was welcomed. Using music, again, to put her in the emotional state. You got to be in the emotional state to track those experiences in. And ultimately now at work, her nemesis, they have a great relationship. They meet every other week for coffee. She gets caught up, but she doesn't feel the need to be part of that because she's established that relationship. Whereas before, she was trying to insert herself too much. And same is true with her family, which is where everything that we do to improve work outcomes also translates into family outcomes as well.
It seems to me like you could see then what you said earlier on was the fact that feeling like less than her sister probably fueled her to her success, but at the same time it then became a limiting factor
Yes.
into or get to the next.
Exactly.
And when you're dealing with high performers, that you've got to unshackle them so that they can reach their full potential.
Right. To keep all the good side that she had, but now leverage it in another way because she's not running from something anymore. See, this is what I see a lot of times when leaders start to get successful. They're still running from the monster that they were trying to overcome, but their circumstances have changed. But it's like the brain doesn't, no, it still looks like this, right? And so what we try to do is use music to be able to shift their state so that they can actually begin to experience get other data points to experience that. I mean, we know music shifts our state. That's why we use it to work out with. What I'm suggesting is music can be used far more intentionally and powerfully to even heal old wounds and patterns that are getting in our way.
That does make a lot of sense. One of the things and that I've worried about, was when I first started, and it was probably a year before I started my company. I worked in another financial services firm, so I was probably in my early 20s, and the women who were in the office that kind of ran the office, the or the staff was probably in their mid-50s or something like that. And they used to say things like, sexual harassment will not only be encouraged, it will be judged. And, I mean, that was 37 years
Yeah.
ago, 35 years ago. And I find myself now as in that role, as trying to, as you build culture and you want people to love coming to work, and to try to create that an environment where everybody can get what they want. And I think a part of it is just, you've got to have proper team selection. I just try to not have people that are looking to be offended in our organization, that wake up every day finding a place to be offended. But it's very hard, and I think sometimes people don't get the best of you, or don't get invited to things because you're afraid that you're putting yourself or the firm in a litigious situation or something like that. Like you may wind up unintentionally discriminating against people in order to be so politically correct, and to try to get the balance where, and I have another expression that I have, which is, you almost can't say it. Like I always say, the harder you hug them, the harder you can kick them. Well, we're not kicking anybody, or we're not being disrespectful to anybody, but in a way where you can help people grow by having New York direct conversations with them in a very loving, thoughtful way, but to say, hey, we can do better here, or you could do better, without and especially working with a lot of young people. It's very difficult to navigate it in this kind of society. Tell us a little bit about that. How do you coach teams, or how do you how do you
Yeah.
build, how do you build and maintain these high performance teams?
Yes, that is the specialty of what we do, right?
Mm,
That's what I've been doing all this
yeah.
time. And we use a process that helps people understand their core motivator or driver. I think as human beings, we think we're chameleons and can see 360 degrees, but we can't. We have a central vision and we have a peripheral vision. And where we put our focus of attention, what we're motivated by, that's what we see. But there's something behind our head that we can't see. So we use an assessment tool called the Enneagram that helps identify. The way we've applied it is your leadership style. So what is your specific leadership style? And I'm talking about everyone on the team, and anyone can be a leader, right? It's sort of, what is your focus of attention? Where does your attention go? And have people first understand their own, what drives them, where they're motivated. It's very different than other assessments that look at behavior. It's like, what's driving you? What's motivating you? And based on that, they start to build the awareness that they have this blind spot. When you bring then the team together to take a look at and learn from each other, it really turns conflict on its head in building high performing teams, because now I can understand why you say this is blue, and why, if there's someone else in the model, it's a circle. Like if there's a model, there's someone actually looking the other direction. And usually those are your growth paths, because it tells you not only what your direction of growth is, what you need to be working on based on that focus of attention, but who can best support that growth on the team. And I think it brings this connectivity and collaboration in a way that, an authenticity and vulnerability that makes teams stick and turns conflict really on its head, because now I understand why that person is seeing it a different way. And I understand the value they bring from that perspective. So we can actually get on the same page in a much faster way, versus me judging them from my own motivation perspective, which is what we do. We judge from our own type, style. I'm like, why is that person doing that? That's crazy. Then you understand, and now you can work with it. And so that's been really the unlock of collaboration and communication and resolving conflict on the team. But also, even for leaders and managing people, once you know your more junior people, what is actually driving them, now you can help describe the work in the way that best suits that driver.
How do something else, as I was reading your book, some other things that sort of popped in my head, and with our discussion, is when you have leaders you're dealing generally with senior leaders and owners of companies, or how accurate do you think they really are in terms of assessing how other people see them and their own leadership?
Well, not totally accurate, I would say. It depends on how much work they've done, self-development work, right?
Right.
How often are they asking for feedback along the way from others? We do a 360 process, which will show them exactly what that gap is, where they will assess themselves against the same criteria on leadership that others will assess them on as well, whether it's peers, their board, direct reports, other categories. And they can actually see numerically where is the biggest gap in their own self-perception versus actual leadership. But I really would say it varies based on the level of growth the leader's been through and how often they're regularly getting feedback from those around them already.
One of the theories I have is you'll go and speak with, you and I will get to speak in front of groups of business owners or business leaders, and you'll have a conversation with the group of, let's call it, entrepreneurial people. And you'll say to them, how many people in the room are entrepreneurs? And their hands go up. And you, in about 30 seconds, you get to realize that they're not entrepreneurs. They bought themselves a job. They're not even business owners. They've maybe it's a good paying job. They make a lot of money, or maybe make a decent amount of money, but they've bought themselves a job rather than being entrepreneurs. And I think that the common denominator that I see around leadership is that most of those folks, because that's what they teach in business school, that's what they teach you in other places. They teach you that, if I just get my product cheaper, or we provide the best level of service, or we, the kind of like blocking and tackling. And I think that they lose the concept that when you're not really growing a business, we're growing people. And that, good leaders create followers and great leaders create other great leaders. And if they can, the better leader they can become and the better culture they can build in their organization, that's the magic elixir for exponential growth. And so kind of leadership, like I think that so many folks are not even aware of it or don't get it. It's sort of like a consultant buzzword, or, but they don't realize why they're not having the success that they could.
Exactly.
And, is that how you see it?
Absolutely. I mean, that's what I see. Like, people will come, that leader example that I gave you, she came to me and said, how can I be more influential and persuasive to the people that I need to convince that I need to be part of these meetings? Like, if only they would change, right? And I get that. That's where we go first, right? We want to control our external environment, but I promise you that you must deal with your internal environment first, because that is driving everything that you pay attention to versus not pay attention to. And the reality is, as human beings, we do not pay attention to 100% of the data that's presented to us. We selectively choose what to pay attention to.
I would, I always say, like, if I would, and I'm going to do this, is I'm going to introduce you to some folks I think that can benefit from the work that you do, and to some of our clients. And I would say to them this. I would say this as I've done with throughout my career. I'd say this is going to work 100% of the time with two caveats. Number one, the reason it won't work is because you say, I'm fine as the leader. You got to fix my dysfunctional team. It's not me. Or the second is you let the inmates run the asylum. You go, hey, you know what? We're going to bring Susan in, but we're going to wait them out, and hopefully she'll go away in 6 months, and we won't have to do anything that Susan's going to tell us to do. Like, well, oh, it's too hard. It's too this, it's doesn't fit in our schedule. But short of those two things, if you trust the process, you're going to help transform your organization. Are there those are the two that I see most commonly of the only reason why the work that you do would not turbocharge an organization. Are there others that I'm missing, or others?
I think it's just a flavor of what you've already identified as the first one, which is, no matter who we're working with, if there's sort of this belief that, I don't have things to work on, it's everyone else. We're all a work in progress. I continue to work with coaches, and I need to be several steps ahead of where my clients are in order to be able to be of value. So I think it's a lifelong journey of growth and development. And really, the best leaders are on that path, which is why, so the podcast that you mentioned that I have is called The Enlightened Executive. And we really wanted to highlight leaders who have walked a growth journey. What have they done, executives and entrepreneurs, to be able to make that pass, right? That transformation.
One of the things I would love for people, first of all, my first recommendation to anybody watching this is I want everybody to do what I did and just go buy a copy of the Leaders Playlist. I think it's a great read, and I just think it'll there's nobody that can't benefit from reading this book. And so I'd love everybody I know to go buy a copy. And in fact, if you got an organization, buy 100 copies. But the thing that I love about your program is there's lots of ways to enter your world, at not only at different commitment levels of time, but commitment levels of price and other things, so that, and depending on your organization and how it fits, you do I know you do a lot of speaking, keynote speaking around the country, but you've got master classes, you've got masterminds, you've got other programs. How would if somebody was watching this and they say, I'd love to talk to Susan, how could they, well, we'll give them a website, or we'll give them a, place to contact, but I'd be happy to, you can give that at any time, but just tell them about kind of the different ways that, because sometimes I think people, when it's such a big commitment, not only of money, but also sometimes of time, it scares people off. And I love the fact that there's different ways, there's different strokes for different folks. Tell us about how you designed your organization.
Yes. I would say the easiest thing is to go to susandrumm.com and take the free quiz that we have on there on Enlightened Leadership. And it's very simple, 7 questions. It's going to suggest places where you may have your superpower and also the liability that I talked about. And I say suggest because obviously in a 7-question quiz, it's a door opener for you to start to think, what resonates here with me? And what I hope it does is spark the desire to delve deeper. And then we'll tell you what that relates to, what chapter in the book that relates to, so that you can delve deeper. And then we wanted to give people a real coaching experience of building their own playlists, determining what that old playlist is and how to create the new one. So that's why I built the masterclass, where people can go in and take this online course and go through the process. They get a workbook, they get the examples, and they can uncover for themselves what is that ceiling that's getting in the way.
I would encourage everybody to do it. And the website address is, or how do they get it? It's Susan Drumm.
SusanDrumm.com, SUSANDRUMM.
So Drumm with two double M. Double M's.
Yeah. My name is Drumm, and I write a book about leadership and music. So there's no coincidences, I guess.
I think that's by the way, do you still do any acting?
I don't. I think, to me, that wasn't the highest calling of service that I could be providing. What I do now and the way it's transforming people's lives, that's far more meaningful for me.
I have a finance background, economics background, accounting, somewhat. And so, but the thing is, I always wonder if I look back, is would I've been better with those classes, as I have, 5 kids that are, one's out of college, and 2 are in college, 2 are in high school. And I wonder, would we be better off with psychology, philosophy, music, are there other things that would better prepare you for life than knowing a lot about finance or accounting?
Yes.
Meaning I think that in the real world, I think that the thing that's also missing is, and it depends. I mean, there's some technology industries that it's just on your phone or not. But I think for most of the world, if your customers, patients, or clients are people, and the people you're still working with are people, I always say we're not in the financial services business; we're in the people business. People, and I think that I think that that folks in our folks so much, almost especially younger people, want to want to move away from that and have the least amount of humor interaction possible. And I think the thing that it also does, it makes it for a much less unkind world, because if I was sitting across the table from you, nobody ever says anything unkind. On Zoom, I'm looking at you. It's a possibility you could say something unkind to me. With people on social media or on Twitter or on email or text, it's humiliating how the unkindness to other people, because you don't have to really deal with them. That's a problem, I think, in our government. Everybody in Washington was friends. When people had to be in Washington and there weren't the amount of flights, everybody in Washington, Democrats and Republicans, their kids grew up together. They were at little league games together. They went to dinner together. They were friends. It was hard to say horrible things and do horrible things to each other because we were really in a relationship and it together. Now it's like two warring tribes. And I don't see how, I just think that the work that you're doing will allow that transformation, and allow transformation so we can build a better society and a better world, and a more productive world. And all I can tell you is that I know your schedule. I know how busy you are, and I just wanted to thank you so much for taking time to spend a little bit of time with us today. And I just as again, I just want to show this book again. And I just want, I just like everybody to either reach out to Susan on her website or to buy this book, and because it's really special, and she's very special. And just thank you for being here today.
Thank you. Thanks for creating the platform to have this conversation. I'm grateful to be on here to talk with you about it.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Susan Drumm.